Welcome back. So, have you ever thought about a very important part of your life and all the tiny little coincidences that got you to that point? Well, today I'm going to tell the story about how I met my wife and how it somehow all started when I was 12. So, when I was away at boarding school, because my parents had no idea what to do with me when I was growing up, so they decided to ship me off so somebody else could figure it out. My cousin mailed me a mix CD, and on it was a Flaming Lip song. And I absolutely fell in love with them, and they became my absolute favorite band. Around this same period of time, I started getting into drugs, started drinking quite a fair amount, and then flash forward when I was 21, it started getting worse, and at one point I ended up getting a DUI on a bicycle. And even though it's completely non-motorized, a regular ass bicycle, they actually charged me with this, and part of my sentencing, I guess, it's not like it wasn't like a real court, whatever. I had to go to a mandatory inpatient rehab, even though it was my very first offense of any type and it was on a bicycle. But because of that, I wound up at a place called Alina Lodge, which, if you are in recovery and you ever hear the words Alina Lodge, you should run in the other direction. This place lies to literally everybody that comes in about how long they're going to be there. You can't even write letters to people on the outside, and you can only use a phone if you are calling your parents, and even then it's only under the strict supervision of somebody else working there. You can't even run around the campus. If you do anything more than a brisk walk, then you get into I can't even begin to describe how they take away all physical autonomy that you have while you are there. The parts that affected me the most, though, was they were very transphobic and took away all of my feminine clothing, and they also completely segregated the men and the women in this facility. So not only was I not able to present as myself, but they had me grouped in with only men, and I couldn't even speak to women while I was there. And it absolutely ruined me. This is someplace where they hold you for about a year and a half, and I couldn't even make it through 6 weeks there. I started getting so depressed, and at one point they said, well, if you need all of that type of stuff while you're in recovery, then you should be at the Pride Institute with the freaks. And I was like, well, what is that? What's the Pride Institute? And they're like, oh, well, it's a rehab for queer people out in Minnesota. You probably should have gotten sent there. And they were using it as an insult. They were using it as a threat, as something negative. But I ended up getting so depressed while I was there that they ended up sending me to a psych ward because I just wasn't even getting out of bed. And the psych ward helped make it so that I never had to go back to that place. Just thank God. I don't know what I could have done to try to survive more than a year there. So, flash forward to Burlington, Vermont. I go to see my favorite band, which is as I said, Flamin' Lips. And at that concert, I meet this woman who ends up hooking me up with the best job that I had ever had at that point in my life. It was paying like $50 an hour plus tips, and I was absolutely overjoyed. So to celebrate getting that new job, my friend and I decided that we were going to go skydiving. And we had it all set up, but the very first week that I got my first paycheck from there was the day that the skydiving places closed for the year because the ground was too hard and the air was too cold, so they were shut down for the winter. So we had to decide last minute something else to do, and it just had to be, crazy, stupid, and expensive. So what we wound up finding was this music festival in Colombia called Estéreo Picnic. And we chose that because the Flaming Lips were playing, and then also D. Antwoord was playing, which was one of my friend's favorite groups. And while we're at this festival, I make some really good friends there. And later down the line, I ended up moving in with those friends when I moved to it's what made it possible for me to move to Colombia so easily. And really they gave me the opportunity to just do that at all. So once I'm living there, one night I go to this karaoke party and I end up winning the entire karaoke contest, and one of the prizes is that I got tickets for this BDSM festival in Bogota. So I wouldn't have typically gone there if I had just heard about the festival, but because I had free tickets and it was expensive, I was well, I guess I should probably go. So even though it was a 10-hour bus ride and I didn't really like going into Bogota, I decided to go. And at that festival, I meet this woman, and at least for the first night, we had really good chemistry. We really hit it off. So I spent the next 3 days at her apartment, and after that point, I ended up moving in with her. And that crashed and burned really fucking fast. And I ended up dating one of her friends. Now, this relationship was doomed from the start, but I fell really, really hard for that girl. And when it ended up completely crumbling and falling apart, I wound up falling back into drug use. And I got very seriously addicted to heroin. And I, hadn't had issues with addiction since my transition at that point. But I could not pull myself out of it. I didn't know what to do. And for the first time in my life, I was the one making the decision of, okay, I need rehab, I need help. In the past, it was always something that was either forced upon me or, well, really just that. But I thought back to 7 years prior where what they told me at Alina Lodge of, well, if you need that kind of stuff in recovery, then you should be at the Pride Institute. So I wound up flying from Colombia to Minnesota just to go to that rehab, and I was just going to do my 30 days and fly right back because I had never planned on coming back to the States. Like, I had found my home in Colombia. Like, I preferred it over the States a million times over. But while I was at that rehab, I ended up meeting the most beautiful, adorable, gorgeous soul that I have ever known, like, in my entire life. And I decided to move to Minnesota, where I had never even been to Minnesota before going to that rehab. I didn't know, like, anybody else here, but I knew that I was going to give it a shot with this amazing human being who I am very lucky 4 years later to be able to call my wife. And that's it. Do you have any stories like this of really small things that could have easily not happened winding up to be the biggest and most important event in your entire life? If so, leave it in the comments. But hope you enjoyed this one. Have a nice night.